I mentioned last week, for those of you who were here, that I was hoping you would step up and really pull some of the weight in this message by reflecting on this idea, I have become my mother. Now, this is not just for women. Maybe it's a little easier for us to think about that than for men. But certainly I know there are men who feel they have been shaped and formed by their mother in, we're talking about positive ways this morning, in ways that have nurtured them to become the people they are and see their mothers. In this passage from Jerusalem, thank you so much, Reverend Hinshaw, for the background, because how many of you had an ancestral mother, or maybe it was you, who had to cross a body of water to come live in this place? Come on, every single hand should be up, right? We are all immigrants, and we have a God who was very, very clear about how immigrants are to be treated by the people of the land. Very clear about what hospitality looks like in God's gracious arms of receiving one another. And in this story, as Carolyn said, the Israelites are coming back actually into what we would call Palestine. And so there are other peoples there. And there's a choice to be made. Who will be your God in this new place? Every one of your ancestors had to make that decision. And in my family, sort of the parallel for us, I guess, is somewhere before 1900, my family, my great-great-grandmother had brought her children into the United States in Texas, and they were had come to El Paso. And at some point, it's my guess, I did a little research on this, I believe they came in contact with the Methodist Protestant church. There were missionaries that were sent to the southwest of the Methodist Protestant church, not the Methodist Episcopal church, but the Methodist Protestant church. And I believe it was contact with them where they began to become familiar with the Wesleys and their teachings. And one of my great-grandmother's brothers became very much enamored of John Wesley's works and talked to his mother about it. And it was my great-great-grandmother who decided, in this new land, y'all do what you want to do, but for me and my house, we're going to be Protestants, Methodist Protestants. And so that's who we became. That's who we became. And I count this long line of mothers, and I'm now 5th generation, and my daughters are 6th generation in the Methodist Protestant tradition. And so I look at that, and this little quip I found, mirror, mirror on the wall, I have become my mother after all. But clearly, I would not be here if it were not, literally, I would not be here with you in the role I'm in without my ancestral mothers making that decision and deciding, you're all going to be Methodists. And my great-grandmother had 13 children, so that was a lot of Methodists right off, right? And a lot since. And I'm sure some of you have some of those stories, and I just want to invite you to share some of those today. Choose this day. How many of you had a mother or a mothering figure who basically made that decision for your household? We're going to be church people. We're going to be God people. Yes, a lot of you. It's, not always it's the mother. Sometimes it's a father or a grandfather or an uncle, but for a lot of us, it was some version of mom who made sure the faith was transmitted. And I want to honor those daughters here this morning who are honoring their mothers by joining them in worship. And the son, Chris, sorry about that. I don't mean to miss you. There may be others. But those of you who are adult children, here with your mom because you know how much she values her life of faith and sharing it with you. So thank you for that gift. That's a beautiful gift this morning. Anybody know who this is? Probably not, but that's okay. That's all right. A couple of you might. Good poetry is like effective prayer. Think about that. I love poetry, and I wish more of you would give me poems to share or read them yourselves. Good poetry is like effective prayer. It feeds the human spirit. Oh, yes, it does. It nourishes. It puts us in touch with forces far greater than ourselves. Doesn't it, though? It uses language, that art of using language to carry us beyond ourselves. Well, that is Lorna Goodison, who is the poet laureate of Jamaica. And I wanted to share these two poems with you, both from Jamaican poetess. And as we go through them, as you hear something where you realize you have become your mother, and you want to share that, just raise your hand, and we're going to pass the mic around. Mark, I saw you. Oh, Mark's right there. He's ready. He's on his tiptoes. But we'll go through this first one. This one's beautiful, and it really hits home for me in a lot of ways, and it may for you as well. So just raise your hand if you want to respond when we get to the end of a strophe, okay? Yellow-brown woman, fingers smelling always of onions. My mother raises rare blooms and waters them with tea. Her birth water sang like rivers. My mother is now me. Anything in there that rings a bell for you and your mother? How about the fingers smelling always of onion? I told you I was raised in a restaurant. My grandma's fingers chopped a lot of onions and garlic, right? How about you? What did your mother's fingers smell of? Or your mother, her? Anybody? Oh, yes. Pamela, go ahead.
Hello and good morning, church.
Good morning.
I think of fingers, and my mom was always a church musician, and she always played the piano. She played piano for the young people's choir, and later on, I found myself picking up her torch, and I taught kids in choir at school, and I did that for nearly 20 years. Mm-hmm. So, and then later on, with my mom's fingers, when she had cancer, my mom remained strong, still always going to church and playing, and she became self-conscious of her hands because the medication that she was taking started to show, and it was darkening her hands. Mm-hmm. When she spoke to me about it, how affected she was because her hands were so important to her, I said, Mom, but that's the beauty, that's your mission, that you're showing your faith in Christ, your belief in God, that even in the midst of your suffering, that you can still praise Him with the beauty of your music that you perform.
Amen. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you. Anyone else? I love my mother raises rare blooms. Do you think that's about plants or children or both? Right? Waters them with tea. Are we tea drinkers in Jamaica? I thought so. Oh, go ahead, Clover. Bush teas? Say it again.
Bush teas. My mother had a bush tea for different illnesses, and it worked.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful. Let's go to the next. My mother had a linen dress the color of the sky and stored lace and damask tablecloths to pull shame out of her eye. Isn't that beautiful? What do you think that means? Lace and damask tablecloths to pull shame out of her eyes. Perhaps even in some poverty, everyone has something they're proud of, something that china of their grandmothers, or something that they pull out, right? That remind anyone of your mother and how you've become your mother? Something you treasure? Yes. Go ahead. Mark? There. Well, keep your hand up so he can see you. Thank you, Nola.
My mother, she's a seamstress. And when we grew up, whatever piece of material that she get, she will make us something to wear. So when I grew up, I saw I still doing the sewing, and that's how I get the interest to do the sewing myself.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Thank you. How many of you had a mom who taught you to sew? Yes. Or a grandma, or yeah. All right. Anyone else on this one? I am becoming my mother, brown, yellow woman, fingers smelling always of onions.
There's some behind you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who did I miss? Jean. All right. I could take this one up. Go ahead. Hold on, Jean. Let me get test. Okay. And anyone else in the choir? We can use this one.
Thank
There
you.
we are. You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, I have become my mother
Yes.
because I joined, she was in the chancel choir. And
Oh.
I got to join it when I became high school age. That was the rule. You couldn't be in chancel choir until you were in high school. And so for years, my best friend Leanne and I would sit on the front pew because her mother was the choir director. And we would sit there and we would visit and we would play and we'd trade hats on Easter. And her mother and my mother gave us the evil eye from the choir.
From the choir.
But I'm very proud that my daughter has joined me in the choir.
Amen.
It's a very special thing for me that she's picked up music. Yes. And I'm also proud that my mother taught me to make my crock pot beans. And I bring them to every potluck, and they get eaten every time. I take home a clean dish, and she did the same thing. So she taught me to make those beans, and I make them every time, and I bring them.
Oh,
so thank you for liking them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jean. Forward through the ages. Don't stop. Don't stop. Okay, our next poetess is Joanne Andrea Hutchinson, again a Jamaican. And she wrote this poem, I Have Become My Mother. And so we'll walk through this one. It's a little longer, but it's really beautiful. I sometimes resented, oh boy, your overprotective and caring ways. At times it seemed such a bother. But with each passing day, I realize more and more I have become my mother. Overprotective, caring ways. Anyone want to own up to that? Okay, we'll move on. Let's see. I have become the sweetness of your beautiful smile, the kindness in your eyes, the tenderness in your voice as you made me feel I was your greatest prize. Anyone have a witness to your mother? I just love that. No one? Kyle, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, my mom, she was like, she's a really hard worker, and like sorry.
That's good.
My mom's a really hard worker, and she inspired my sister and I, to go to school and get our education and get good jobs when we were young, to do everything. And I remember her fingers were always typing because she's she was a secretary and a tax collector and treasurer, so she was always typing and calculating and stuff like that.
Typewriters.
And I want to also praise God for my grandma. I remember her sewing on her old 1920s favorite sewing machine, the treadle sewing machine, and
19th century.
she was a housewife, so she did a lot around the house, and she took care of my sister and I when my mom and dad were at work.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else for this? I think the last line is the one that grabs me and in this whole poem, and that really speaks to me of my mom. I was your greatest prize. Made me feel I was your greatest prize. And I think that's probably maybe the thing I treasure most, perhaps, about my own mom, that she always made my sister and I feel like we were her greatest prizes. And let me see, I don't think Lourdes is here this morning, and Fran's not here, but let me just share with you. When she was really, my mom was very affectionate. Of course, our culture is very, very affectionate culture. And when she wanted to, tell us how special we were, her favorite way of doing that she would just say, "Ay, que muchachas tan bonitas son las reinas de su mama," which means, oh, what cute little girls, they're her mommy's little queens, basically. And it was just this little phrase, this little sing-song phrase that we knew was just for us. And if there's anything that I hope that I've passed on to my two daughters, it's that kind of love, that they know that there is just nothing that could get between us and me and them in my love for them. And they are the most wonderful prizes of my life. No matter what, that's who they are. And so I hope that's where that comes from for me, is my mom. Anyone else on this one? Treasure that. I have become fire in your belly for integrity and truth, the peace within your soul. I have become the one who takes life's broken pieces and dares to make them whole. Does that sound like your mom and who you've become? Who are those of you who pick up the pieces and help put them back together because your mom showed you how? Anybody? Oh, I bet there's lots of you. Yeah. A lot of heads are saying yes. Yeah. Oh, was that you, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take that one.
Go ahead.
That one speaks to me about my mother because she was a lifelong counselor and great listener in many ways.
Yes.
And she was always trying to help people in a way of just being with them, sharing time with them. So I picked that up from her, I hope.
Thank you. That's beautiful, Mark. Thank you. Okay. The friend to the friendless, the voice of the voiceless, she who lends a helping hand, who knows how to make lemonade with so-so water if things fail to go as planned. Oh, rescuing mom, right? Friend to the friendless. Did your mother befriend people others were not so ready to? Or lift up her voice on behalf of those who couldn't? Lemonade makers? Yes, Jerry.
Thank you. My parents were in the restaurant business, and my mother was also a caterer. And any time she had any food left over, she always took it down to, it wasn't loaves and fishes then, but to where the hungry were. She always did that, and she always looked out for our family. She was a very hardworking woman from Plainville, Kansas, whose family, our family, donated the land where the Methodist Church was built in Plainville, Kansas. Wow. And my granny, who was with me a lot because my folks had the restaurant, she was the treasurer of the North Sacramento Methodist Church and used to take me there as a, yes. When I was young. Yes. And they used to have a great senior time on Sunday evenings with dinner and stuff, and she'd have me go down and dance for them and do different things that I used to do. And so I was born Methodist and baptized Methodist, and will probably die Methodist the way it looks. So anyway, my mother was a jewel, just a jewel.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Thank you. And thank you for carrying on her caring love. Yes, Tamari. Up here, Mark. With Tamari. Okay.
I was raised up in a Methodist family. I went to this Methodist high school for 12 years. My mom and dad were lay leaders of our church for 35 years of my life. Wow. So my mom, everybody's invited and included in our home. Yes. Every Sunday we would feed like 20 to 30 people in our little congregation, most of whom are youth, and they don't have any place to go to for lunch. Our house is always open. Because my mom is smart to pick up and make dishes from scratch. I wouldn't worry what to buy to feed the whole family, plus the 10, 20 other people that would come for lunch. Wow. Because she's smart to make food from scratch. And I guess she's the one who make me know how to make the lemonade now with so-so water if things fail to go as planned. And she always gives us the challenge, you just pick up and volunteer. It's up to God. He will provide come Amen. The day. And He will provide, and He will give the weather, the right weather, and the number of people to be accommodated. You just go ahead and volunteer. It's not on you. He will provide.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Praise God for your mom. I like this phrase. I used to wonder why you were so into plants. Didn't quite understand the nurturing streak. And these days, I laugh at myself as I have become the biggest gardening freak. Isn't that wonderful? Anybody pass on the green thumb to you? Yes? Jane, your auntie? Yeah, for me, it was my auntie. Anyone else? Oh, Ken? Ken of the many beautiful raised beds?
So I wouldn't say that my mom passed on a green thumb to me, because she had a green thumb, I do not. When we were kids, she was a flower arranger. So she would enter into competitions in Bakersfield and Kern County. Yeah. Ikebana, but it was just the general Kern County flower competition, flower society. And she would have flowers for me and my sister to make an arrangement, my sisters. So she would say, here, just take this, and you can do one. And so I would, and I was not very good at it. But I don't know if I got consolation prize, but I developed an appreciation for flowers and their arrangement, and for gardening, even though I may not have the talent. Different phases of her life, she taught us service when we were young. She was surprisingly, president of the PTA and the president of the YWCA, and I'm not sure why she was, but she was, and later in her life she was serving in many other capacities, and it just fulfilled her, I think, and she saw that as her calling.
Yes.
So we learned that.
Thank you, Ken. It was her calling and her gift, and she passed that leadership on. Thank you. Yes, Rudy.
Before I met my wife, my mother was the most influential person in my life. But as I look back, my mother was a composite mother because I was raised by my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, and in some way by my sisters.
Yes.
My mother was one of 7, the daughter of a Baptist parson or minister, and she played the organ, and my uncle pumped the organ, the foot-pumped organ. And I hate to say this, but as a result of being the daughter of a Baptist parson, she was quite irreverent. And that irreverence, unfortunately, was passed down to some degree to me. I also had the fortune or misfortune, based upon what I've seen here, of being the only son and surrounded by 2 sisters. And based upon their accusations, I was told that I was the one and only as far as my mother was concerned.
That's sweet.
My mother also did pass on to me the idea of going to church. It didn't make any difference which church it was as long as you went to church, even though she was quite irreverent about it. She also taught me about gardening. And Clover just mentioned to me that although I'm a pretty good gardener, I don't know the names of the flowers, but they are all pretty. And I try to keep them that way. And that's the result of my mother's influence.
That's beautiful. That's the bottom line, Rudy. I'm holding back. The one and only. With the filter of age, there is so much I understand. So much is oh so clear. Even the punishments meted out in love because you hold me dear. Does that ring any bells for some of you who were naughty? Not beautiful? Beverly, you dare? Come on up. Why don't you just come up to the mic?
When I was little, and since my mom is blind, she put bells on my shoes so she would know where I was. And one time I was in the house, I actually hid from her. I stayed over by the TV, and she was calling me, and she would run around the house, and I was like, just laughing in the corner. And she was just like trying to find me. I was like, and then I would just hide there, and I wouldn't want to move. And then finally when we went to kindergarten, she's like, okay, we'll put the bells on. I was like, no bells, no bells. I don't want that. So, but she always taught me to also be like a leader. I need to step up and be more of a leader. And I find that really encouraging to me, that she is just an amazing mom to me. She's taught me so much, and she's still teaching me more. So
Amen.
Not only was I a little naughty when I was little, but she is an amazing person. So I love her so much for that.
Thank you, Beverly. Happy Mother's Day, Jeannie. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Now, as a mother, I see so much of you in me, in the things I feel and say and do. And, Mommy, I am a better person, a better parent, having passed through the university of you. Isn't that an excellent last line? The university of you. How many of you are graduates of your mama? Amen. Anybody want to share as we close this? No? If you haven't had the chance, I know that you'll get the chance to say thank you to your mama. Oh, am I missing? Oh, Marion, go ahead.
My mom, even though I'm not sure she graduated from high school, always was very curious, and she had quite a few of the great books, and she prized them, and she loved reading, she loved learning. And even though she didn't know how to read music particularly, she would compose, and she would compose music, she would compose poetry.
Wow.
And she was really a feminist before the time of feminism, although it came out in a lot of unusual ways and ways that perhaps weren't welcomed. And she had the ability to strive, even though she came from extremely modest means, and she married up and felt bad about herself because of that.